This week, my grandpa passed away. Peacefully, in his sleep. He was a really old guy who lived a really, really great life. He was a dad, a son, a father, a brother, a friend, and to me, he was the best grandpa in the world. So I wanted to take a second to embarrass him in the afterlife. When I used to call grandpa, I would have to talk really, really darn fast, otherwise, he would pass the phone on to my grandma or something. So for this video, I'm going to follow grandpa phone call rules, and I'm going to talk really fast and give as many stories as I can before he inevitably passes the phone along to St. Peter or somebody. My grandpa Mo was a very introverted man who did not like to be the center of attention, so he'll probably pop in his head to his funeral, um, maybe politely nod a few times, but then excuse himself and find a nice heavenly armchair somewhere and watch football. For as long as I can remember, Grandpa Mo and my grandma lived in this beautiful little house, like white picket fence, cookie cutter, like a gingerbread house, paradise kind of place in the middle of absolutely nowhere. I mean, like literally nowhere, just a barren desert full of sand dunes and cactus and tarantulas. But somehow, right in the middle of it all, was this little slice of heaven. That was all my grandma's doing. My grandpa contributed a junkyard, a massive shed with a toilet. Not a bathroom, a toilet. Just a toilet. A bunch of horses, and a pelt slung over a barbed wire fence for target practice. Oh, he also handmade the world's most dangerous treehouse that I will include pictures of. So you believe me. One time when I was a kid, he grilled steaks, and I asked what kind of meat it was, and he looked at me, a 10-year-old, and a My Little Pony fan, and said, Rainbow Dash. This guy was a mountain man, a huge, pale, quiet mountain man with a wicked sense of humor, and I loved him to pieces. He taught me how to shoot a bow and arrow, even though I kept hitting his shed and his chicken coop and cats. He showed me how to skin a rabbit and then painstakingly made me matching lucky rabbit foot earrings and necklace to take on my trip with me. The only problem is they hadn't fully cured yet. So I just had a bag of rotten animal flesh in my suitcase for months. I just filled the bag with salt and used them to scare my roommates. They were lucky though. I worked so hard to impress my grandpa. I chopped and stacked firewood for hours. I would watch football with him and then just cheer whenever he cheered and boo whenever he booed because I didn't know what was going on. He loved hunting, so I would steal his magazines and I would read ahead of him. That way I could name drop tagging laws and hunting regulations and pretend like I knew what any of it meant. I think he figured that out eventually, but he still showed me his hunting trailer and his favorite camping spot. And he also convinced me to eat a salt lick off of the ground. He's so lucky I didn't get sick. One time, my grandma made this huge, beautiful party for General Conference, and it was a Harry Potter themed party. Like, she hung candles from the ceiling with fishing line. She had this big trolley full of gorgeous handmade treats. The walls were covered in her original artwork. It was the full, beautiful Hogwarts experience. And then my grandpa came in with literal armfuls of dead animal. And he just interrupted her party with like half of a freshly killed elk. He just threw a tarp on the floor and is like, all right, help me butcher this. And grandma was so mad. She just turned up conference really, really loud. And then the two of us stood there over the kitchen sink, bagging up little Ziploc bags of elk carcass that he would just pass us from the floor. I don't think I've ever laughed so hard in my life. It was the real Harry Potter experience. He also had this prank where he would hide his elk calls, these little speakers that played animal noises, and he would hide them around the yard. so that when relatives would come to visit, he'd start in the afternoon telling, about these weird stories, problems that they'd been having with these strange animals out in the woods, and how he was a little worried about it. Then night would fall and he'd start this big bonfire and start telling all these spooky stories around the fire about people who disappeared out in these deserts. And then casually he'd douse the fire when the night was over and press the little button in his pocket, which started all of those hidden speakers screaming freaky animal noises and scaring the crap out of everybody. And he just stood there and smiled. We made a lot of bonfires. They were really, really fun. And we invented a new kind of s'more. We called it a less. What we'd do is we'd take a marshmallow and open it up and stuff the chocolate and graham crackers inside of it and then like bundle it back up and then roast it for some reason. And we called it a less because it wasn't a s'more. It was less. He thought it was funny. One time, he told me to light a fire, and so he handed me his little mountain man bag of all of his little fire starting gear, right? But he still had the lighter and matches in his pocket, and he had just given me like the bare mountain man essentials. And he sat there on the porch grinning and watching me as I, huddled over this fire trying desperately to prove myself. But I remembered as a kid that my favorite thing to do camping would be to scare my dad by starting a fire on my own in the morning without his help. And so I had learned as a child, cold hunks of ash will still have hot ashes or embers inside of them. I dig around this campfire and I pull out this big blackened log and I break it open, and sure enough, there's a spark in there. And I use it to restart the campfire. And Grandpa was so mad. And I go back to him and I just pretended, oh yeah, I used that flint and steel and the little rubbing the sticks together. Yeah, no problem. I got it. I don't think I ever told him the truth. He one time convinced me to sweep the chimney, mostly by saying things like, I dare you and I bet you won't, chicken. But I did. And my grandma looked like she was going to have a heart attack. But he walked me through it. I think he even literally pushed me up the ladder at one point so I couldn't back out. But I did it. I also shaved his dog to have a little heart on its back leg so that it looked like My Little Pony. One time he bought a telescope because my little sister liked looking at the stars. One day I was shooting jackrabbits on the roof with the bow and arrows that he'd given me when I see this little blue car pull up to my grandma's mailbox, and this stranger gets out and starts messing with the lock. Now, I knew the mailman. I knew UPS. I knew the Amazon guy, but I had never seen this guy. This was not an official truck. And I remembered my grandma telling me about how out here, where everybody lived so far away from the stores, mail theft was a really big problem. And so I see this strange dude, looks like he's trying to open my grandma's mailbox, and I start freaking out because ain't no way nobody's stealing my grandma's mail. No, that would be mean. And so I start yelling at this dude and trying to like shoot the dirt road around him to scare him off. And sure enough, he drops the papers he's carrying and starts scrambling to get back into his car. I slide off the roof and down the pole on the balcony like a feral little desert Batman. And I start yelling for my grandpa, tears streaming down my face. My grandpa runs out of the shed with like a literal pitchfork or something. And the car speeds off, throwing up these big dust clouds. And my grandpa, stops at the mailbox and I pick up all the papers off the ground. And lo and behold, the poor guy wasn't stealing anything. He was leaving political ads in our mailbox. And so I look at my grandpa absolutely mortified and I go, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. He wasn't breaking in. He was leaving ads for Biden. And my grandpa goes, he was what? And so he takes off down the road after a speeding car, pitchfork in hand. I have no idea if he ever caught that guy, but I really hope not. He used to show off by riding the lawnmower with no hands. When I introduced my husband to him for the first time, we had a duel with fireworks swords. The night before I moved away, he said that he was going to take me and my grandma to a fancy dinner and that we had to dress up. He called it a dinner on the town. So we wore only our Sunday best and we got in the car and he drives us down Main Street. And I'm thinking, man, there's so many amazing restaurants. Which one is he going to take us to? And then he starts explaining that he's going to take us to every restaurant on Main Street. And then he starts explaining the rules of dinner on the town. Apparently, this was a little game that he had invented where we were going to stop at every single restaurant. We had to buy one item at every restaurant, but we could only buy one item at every restaurant. And so we had to plan ahead about what we wanted to eat and what we could eat. And I tell you what, we got the most random, weird assortment, just piles of food. And so many water cups. So many water cups. I can't eat that much. Time really goes too fast. And I wish that I had more of it with my Grandpa Mo. But I'm so grateful for every funny little story, for every happy memory, every single moment that I did get. I love you, Grandpa. And I really miss you. And I know I'm really going to miss you. I know we all are. But thanks for everything. Take care of yourself up there. And cause some trouble for us. I love you, Grandpa. Bye.